Isaac, welcome to my show, Leadership and Personal Branding. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to be here with me today.
Of course, glad to be here.
My journey started from Kenya at the orphanage to Ghana, West Africa, and now to USA. I know part of your journey also started from South Sudan to Ethiopia and now in USA. Throughout your journey, I know you have come across different cultures, different obstacles, different people, and many ways of doing things. And you've always been wondering maybe how those things all come together. Today, I'm happy to sit with you, to learn from you, to hear from you, and hopefully your story will inspire others to lead with their unique personal brand story. My goal is to make sure everybody come back to themselves. Sometimes we always look elsewhere until we are redirected back to ourselves to find out our inner greatness, our inner superpower. And that's why I sent you two questions. One was, how will you define your personal brand? And the second part of the question was, what is your personal brand symbol? And how do you use it every day in your life? Isaac, my friend, why don't you start by introducing yourself and tell people about who you are?
Thank you. Thank you. No, like I said before, it's great to be here. And I've known you for a long time, and I appreciate the time that we're taking together to just sit and conversate um, around this topic of personal branding and being able to tell your story. But to kind of answer your questions a bit, I actually had a pretty hard time trying to define my own personal brand. But once I started to look, the biggest thing that jumped out was curiosity. And I think that's very much what defines who I am and uh, kind of defines my story, right? Throughout how I've always done things, the one thing that has always come up is that you're such a curious person, right? Like you're a tinker or somebody who kind of likes to go around and figure out how things work. And that's just really me, right? Like I love figuring out how things work under the hood. Um, that's kind of what drove me to be an engineer, drove me to go on to try to figure things out and start a business. Um, and even now, like I've come to a point where I'm working in the uh, AI world with some of the biggest people in the world in that particular domain. So it's been a great journey. But I guess going back and define and kind of telling people a little bit about who I am. So I actually grew up in a very small village in South Sudan, uh, like really small village from the Law Nord people. And from there, if you can imagine, there's this image of the starving African child, the one with like flies everywhere, big belly out, that they've always shown on like these late night TVs to throw money at. That's
Mhm.
that's pretty much where I started. We lived in these small villages, um, and we didn't have much. Right, there's no electricity, no cars, no lights. And from there on, we grew up, and a war started. A war started between the North and the South, and that kind of drove me and my family out of South Sudan. And so as we were fleeing by foot, of course, right? We had to walk many miles, go land in certain places, and at some point, we ended up at a refugee camp in Ethiopia. And I remember that refugee camp very clearly. But that's where some of my fondest childhood memories came from. Um, that was the first time when I saw an airplane go by, which was something uh, quite surreal, right? I saw cars driving by, and in this refugee camp, um, all those like hard times that were happening as a kid, like I was very intrigued with the stuff that was going on, and this curiosity kind of just drove me to be playful and like be inventive on certain things. And then from there on, we ended up actually being one of the lucky families to be brought to the United States. There was 5 forms that were sent out, and we were one of the lucky 5 families that ended up getting it. And so we came to the US. I ended up getting an education. So ended up with a math, physics, and an aerospace engineering degree. And then once I was done with college, I went to go work for a tech company. And so I started my first tech job, uh, worked there for 2 years, learned a lot of things. And then my college roommates ended up approaching me to start a business. And we ended up starting this business, got funded like over $1 million, right? Um, and we went with that for a while, and that ended up crashing. Once it crashed, I had to start over and kind of figure stuff out from the very beginning. And it felt like I was starting all the way over. But again, that was a journey that led me to kind of rediscover myself, figure out who I am. I had to be really curious again and digging into like what is it about my certain situation that has led me to this point? How can I improve? I was really curious on like how are the people that have gotten ahead of me, how was it that they've done what they've done? And I started digging so much into that, into like just self improvement has become like a really big topic in my life
Yeah.
for that very reason. But then from there on, I went to work for uh, a, a company that was serving the Air Force. And so I worked for the Air Force for quite a while and then went to go work for the Space Force and then the Mayo Clinic. And then now I work as a senior AI project lead for a medical technology company at Boston Scientific, where basically my whole job is to run this program that is meant to take problems that the company's having, go work with essentially really smart people. Like I said, some of the smartest people in their domain in AI, fix the problems or at least come up with solutions for the problems and then bring those solutions back so that the company is able to use them and move forward. That's kind of my story in a quick snapshot. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, I think Isaac, you have a very interesting story and very interesting journey. And the other day I was talking to one of my friends who also is in the US now, but he came to, he's also from Kenya. I was talking to him about like where I grew up and from the orphanage. And then we started talking, and then he mentioned that he actually worked in the orphanage in Kenya, and he worked with many orphanages. And he was aware of the orphanage that I was from. He didn't know me, but he knew of the organization. And he actually said that our off, our orphanage was actually better. We were better off. Then I came up, so then I started thinking, I was curious about, so you can be underprivileged and also have the privileges. And so now there is this concept of how do you tell your story without, uh, how do you tell your story to somebody without thinking your story is the worst story ever? Okay. So how do you tell your story and understanding that somebody else could also be going through some tough things? So I remember when I first met you, I met you in the soccer field
yeah,
in Northfields and Olaf. And then all of a sudden I saw you on the ground crying. And I don't know who stepped on your leg, and it wasn't me.
not true, not true. So first off, to tell the story right, I had the ball playing against this guy, Felix, and he came and tackled me, just took out my legs. I was out for what, like 5 games? He just took out my legs,
A few
almost
games.
broke my ankle.
Yeah. I watched I watched the next few games and I never saw you on the bench. I don't know what happened to you. So anyway, I'm getting to that
Yeah,
time was before I knew you. We were all opponents playing competitive. And my first guest in this show was Mamadi, and I liked what he said. Our story is our unique competitive advantage. And the worst thing you can do is to run away from it. So I like how you've shared your story from the refugee camp, in your story from South Sudan, running away from the war, and then to the refugee camp, and your experience at the refugee camp, and you never gave up on that on what you're experiencing. You kept being curious, seeing cars, see planes, uh, the lights go off, there's no lights. So all those things, I think those experiences is what we should appreciate those experiences because that's what made us tough. And it made you become who you are today through your physics major, your aerospace engineering, and to starting a company, failing multiple times and standing back up to start again another career path also
yeah,
in AI. So can you say more about what your journey has been like and what else you want people to know?
yeah. No, I think you brought a really good point on just um having the heart of a child, like being curious. So as I mentioned before, like if that is what I would use to define as like my personal brand. But um, that is looking beyond the immediate things that are happening, right? So
Mhm.
you mentioned earlier that sometimes we're kind of afraid to share our story, um, and it's usually because we come from like, these really hard backgrounds, right? So once the war broke out in South Sudan and we were driven out of our homes, like millions of people died, right? Homes are displaced. We were one of the only people that ended up getting out of that village and ended up in that refugee camp, right? Like my family was split from the village that we were at, and we went from a place where like there's no electricity. All we did was farm. We were hunting and fishing. Like that was our source of food. But once we got out, it went to a completely different world. Some people
Yeah.
didn't want to do it, right? Some people it was too different for some people to end up handling, and so they kept searching for ways to go back. But my dad was actually a pastor uh, in the refugee camps that we were in, and so because he was a pastor, a lot of his work is all based on service, being able to serve people and help out, and that a lot of times like being a service to somebody or being service to people means like you have to come up with different ways of doing things. And
Mhm.
so as I kind of saw that a bit, um, I think that's a big part of where my curiosity came from. And as I mentioned earlier, like seeing the airplane in the sky, um, it was something that I immediately thought, like as a kid, right? I thought, oh, that is something I want to do one day. I want to be able to be the kind of person who's able to build an airplane, right?
Mhm.
Like these like childish dreams. And
Yeah.
at no point did I ever think that, oh, I couldn't do it. I don't know how it began, right? Like coming from the villages, the majority of people that were living there actually believed that like airplanes were made by godlike figures, people that had godlike powers, because we
Mhm.
couldn't fathom like how do you get something that's that big, that's metal, and it's up in the sky flying. Never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
So I just kept being curious on like, how does these things work? And the curiosity led to like just small routes and different ways of doing things. I started coming up with ways of kind of helping my family out a little bit. And so we would go and like there's broken bikes that are laying around everywhere. And so I'd grab a broken bike, fix it up a bit, and then before you knew it, there's other kids that are coming and asking to ride it, and then I end up charging them to go and ride the bike. And
Mm-hmm.
I just taken something that was completely broken, fixed it up a bit, and ended up charging people for it. And it doesn't have to be something that big.
Yeah.
Uh, Another example is like uh, there was these toys that we used to play with. We didn't actually have toys, right? So in the refugee camp, we had these. We used to take there's this mud or clay like um, thing that came from the ground, right? And we would just take that and we would make figures out of it, right? Kind of like action figures, make like toy cows, toy people, or like clay cows, clay people, and then we end up using those to end up like simulating different battles.
Yeah.
And those were some of the happiest times of my life, right? But
Yeah.
to other people, like those would be horrible times because you're in this refugee camp, there's not
Mm-hmm.
much food, there's like barely any electricity, like
Yeah.
things are just not going as good. But if your mind is constantly jumping to, oh, what can I do? You know, curious about certain things, like you start to see past all of these things. And
Yeah.
so as we ended up coming to the US, all I could think about was, oh, how do I how do I go and do certain things? Right? Like how do I go and uh you know actually go towards building an airplane? Oh, I need to go become an engineer. Oh, engineer, I gotta do math. Oh, physics is there. Okay, I'll do physics. And so we came to the
Mm-hmm.
US and that was kind of my biggest thing. Like all we had was family at that point. So
Yeah.
I stuck with family and went really hard on just trying to make sure that we're able to get our education. Like that's probably one of the biggest thing my father and my parents ended up feeding us was like make sure you get your education. And
Yeah.
so I went down that route and kind of just hammered hard.
Yeah. You know, Isaac, I know some of your brothers already and your sisters, and I know at some point they came and lived with you, and all of you guys, all in the same, like a small house, all of you. I used to just, if I come to your house, I'll meet everybody there. So, and I'll count the number of rooms, they're not even enough. And I know that time you were also in college, and me and you both working at Nova,
Yeah,
the Nova project with the
yeah,
government.
yeah. The muon detectors.
Yeah. So I remember those times, and at that time you were still taking care of your family. So there's one thing I want to share about leadership is about
It's about service.
acting in the moment, guiding and inspiring people with a visionary mindset. That's just something that I kind of, as I look at different leaders or when I think of people and what they do in their own job, and I just piece this together. And when you tell you a story about how you saw where you wanted to be, and then you took the physics class, you saw where you wanted to be, and then you took the math class, and then you had a physics degree, and then you saw where you want to be, and then you took aerospace engineering, and then you saw where you wanted to be, you pivoted all the way to AI. And curiosity, your personal brand, it's very important in this AI side where it's not being taught in class. It's something you show, you see interest, you act in the moment, and you educate yourself. So tell me about how you have used your curiosity and uh, attitude or positive attitude to drive innovation.
Yeah, it takes somebody that's just willing to take one step forward. Um, I think as you said, like one of the biggest thing that helped out with me was that again, like my dad's a pastor, so I got to pick up a lot of the service side of things. Like it isn't always about how do I get something out of it, but how do I serve the next person.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've always had that vision of the airplane that I saw in the refugee camp. Like to this day, I can remember. But then also a super important thing was like family got ingrained in me. Like when we came to the US, we mostly just had our family. And so as my dad is kind of pushing us and saying, hey, like, make sure you get your education, make sure you get your education. Like he's never gone past fifth grade, right? Like, and he was taking these things in that refugee camp. Um, and so like curiosity is usually all about like, how do I make sure that how do I start to realize or start to know the small things that are happening behind closed doors, right? Like just being able to ask questions, being able to like want to know how you can end up doing something, and it really does start with that service. And so when we came in, like of course, like none of us spoke English when we came. And one funny story when we first landed, right? And I think I told you this way back.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, since none of us spoke English, we didn't know how anything worked. There was a swimming pool that was in the common area, and and in that swimming, we wanted to go swimming. And once they opened it up, we were so hyped about going to the swimming pool. We all just took off our clothes, running butt naked, jumped in the pool. Everybody ran out. Like
You
there's
did not
many
wait for the
nothing.
swim
Like
shots.
we didn't even know you had to wear swim shorts, right? Like because we just this is what we used to do back when we were in the refugee camp when we were in South Sudan. There's many
Yeah.
immigrants that have similar stories that are like this. But as you get your education and you kind of move forward, you start to realize these things.
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing is that like you don't let the world kind of beat you down. You just kind of take it as you come and you keep moving forward. And so
Mm-hmm.
as I saw that, I was curious enough to see, oh, why are these guys running out of the pools while I'm naked? Oh, it's because you're not supposed to be doing that. Okay, why aren't you supposed to be doing that? Because that's kind of how society works here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you go forward, you move forward, you just take the next step. And that led me to becoming like the tech engineer, led me to going down the route of starting the company with my friends, which has led me to try to figure out why do small businesses fail, why we failed. Um, just
Yeah.
big things that came out of that were all in the face of failure, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, like, right, it started from a war. We got chased out of our home. Like that would have been painful to anyone. We lived in these refugee camps. That would have been painful to anyone. We're making mistakes where we didn't speak English in a whole new place we never been to. Like
Yeah.
that would have been hard for almost anybody. And that would have like stopped many people from going. And even once I was good enough and got my education and went to start, my business failed and everything fell apart. That would have stopped me, right? It's just having that curious step to, oh, how do I fix this? How do I move forward? What's the
Mm-hmm.
next thing I can do?
Yeah.
Just keeping an open mind is a great thing.
Making a good point. Even in the face of adversity or any complexity that most people run away from, as long as you're curious and you have the determination to
Mhm.
go after your biggest goals, curiosity will lead you there.
Yeah.
And I say this all the time. The the best contribution to you and your family and your friends and those in your sphere of influence is self-development
Yes,
or
man.
self-discovery. The more you find out more about your true unique potential, the more you create more opportunities for you, the more you inspire those around you. So I think, Isaac, you've inspired me for, uh, I haven't told you, but we used to be roommates. We took one class together, electrical class,
Yep.
and then we played soccer, and then you disappeared. And then you came back with RunningTemp, the business. And then you started, I saw you working on a fitness app watch. I saw you working on, I saw you working on AI product. So
Yeah.
like Tony Robbins said, sometimes you just need to disappear. go somewhere quiet, lock yourself in the dark, and when you come out of the dark, you're going to shock the world. That's what he said. So you remind me of that, and Tony Robinson says it well, more than how I just did. So
Yeah,
tell
man.
me about the RunningTemp learnings, how that started, just briefly, and then your interest in AI, since we have a few minutes left. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So,
Yeah.
well, thank you for bringing that up. But so if I can say, like, the biggest thing that came out of the company that we started, RunningTemp, was that it led me down a path of self-discovery. Um, I don't know, like it really started as a really small thing. Like the college roommates came, uh, had some really good ideas on, hey, let's go do this, let's do that. And it was that like we used to work out a lot when we were together. And so since we couldn't work out anymore, we kept getting on calls. And during one call, one of them asked and said, what if we came up with an app where we could all work out separately and be able to track and know exactly like what the other person's doing? And so that was like going to be called Spot Me, bro, which was just like, it was just something really simple where, like, oh, if you needed somebody to spot you, you could press a button and somebody can come spot you. Since I didn't have my friends at the place where I'm working out, it turned into a Fitbit like uh, watch that people can use to track everything that they do in the gym,
Yeah.
which then turned into RunningTemp, which was a craft beer marketplace for breweries, wineries, and distilleries. Um, and even after that, right, like that RunningTemp uh, went pretty good. Like it was over $1 million that we were funded in, lasted for like 2.5 years, and then it crashed. um,
Mhm. Yeah.
but before it crashed, like these guys ended up basically getting out of it. And like as a curious person, I'm still I'm somewhat hard headed, right? Like I'm trying to figure out why isn't it working? How can I make it work? And so I ended up being the only one that's left in the company
Mm-hmm.
about after 2 years. And I brought my whole family, like, right? Like they were working alongside me trying to make it work. And when it crashed, like it crashed super hard. I put everything into this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
My family
Yeah.
was involved. And once it went, like I had nothing left. I had to start over.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find a job, man.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this, but like there was a moment in time that kind of defines everything that I do to this day, right? Uh, and like it came to hardship, right? One of the hardest times in my life. It got to a point where I couldn't afford to not only pay rent, but what really got me was like I couldn't afford to buy formula milk. Like my wife was having a hard time breastfeeding. I couldn't afford to
Mhm.
buy milk, buy
Yeah.
milk for my daughter who was just born.
Yeah.
And being that family was a big thing, like that had such a hard hit on like who I was as a person. Like I went and thought I did all this and got my education and got a job, and now I'm sitting here. I can't afford to buy milk. It was hard.
Yeah.
And even when I reached out, like I couldn't find a job, I couldn't do nothing. I reached out to family, and you were actually one of the two people that ended up helping me out. It was you and the Van Wylens. I had asked you for like, hey man, can you send me some money for rent at this time?
Yeah.
And that's what
Okay.
I
I
decided.
remember.
Like,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
why.
yeah.
You never told me the reason why. You just asked me for some amount of money and I gave
Because
it to you.
because
Yeah.
I don't. It's hard for me to share stories like that. But like now,
Yeah.
now that I've gotten to this point, I realize that being able to share these things kind of help you kind of deal through it and realize what you've been through.
Yeah.
But even as I was doing it, man, like it
Yeah.
that was so painful that I just started to go really hard. Like I started going really hard on self improvement. And
Yeah.
I started waking up at 4 a.m. I was working 18-hour days. Like I started meditating routines. Like I started trying to find people that could like help mentor me. And
Yeah.
like I ended up finding this guy on YouTube called Tom Bilyeu, who like I end up trying like we get on calls on Mondays sometimes. And it's been great, man. Like this guy focused on like a growth mindset, your health in your body, which is like through exercise, and then how you can make business impact.
Yeah.
And just being able to dive and be curious about how all of this stuff comes together has been
Mhm.
like, amazing. Like it drove me to
Yeah.
figure out the mechanics behind like how people improve, like
Mhm.
uh like even things that I have ignored in the past, right? I started paying more importance and attention to those things. I
Yeah.
started to improve my communication skills, right? I started to improve how I listen to people. I
Mhm.
started to even like view, because I used to hate, the idea of a salesperson, being able to just sell people, right?
Yeah.
As somebody who like grew up with the mindset of I want to serve, I found
Yeah.
it terrible to think that like, oh, I had to go and sell things to people. Like I just didn't like it. And so it drove me to really try to figure out who I am, how can I improve, how things really work from the bottom up. And I started just climbing. And that's when my like improvement in like life of who I am, my self-improvement just like took this J curve of just
Yeah.
shooting through the roof, right? And it was because of this like super painful time.
Yeah.
Uh, and so
Yeah.
I would say like even as if you're somebody who's like going through stuff, please like make sure you're taking some time to kind of look at yourself, how you can improve yourself, how certain things work, and just figuring that stuff out. One of the biggest thing uh, I learned for like self improvement and being able to go make an impact in the world.
Mhm.
Um, like one thing that people can start with that I thought really helped me was uh, getting up before the sunrise, right? Open eyes before the sunrise.
What you are saying is this.
Y'all have no idea what 4 a.m. looks like. Why would you not wake up? Because you're too
Right?
busy sleeping in. Some of y'all have no idea what 4 a.m. looks like. Why would you not wake up? Because you're too busy sleeping in.
Basically came through some of the hardest times, one of the hardest times in my life, right? Like I was just telling you guys about how I couldn't really feed my daughter. I couldn't buy milk. I pay rent, nothing. And so I started waking up at 4 a.m. in order to shape up. Um, I just had to get moving and felt like it was up to me to make the change that I wanted to change. And so I think for those that are out there, one of the biggest things that they can do is be up before the sunrise. Open eyes before the sunrise. If you look at many of the titans, the people who have shaped the world, right? Like the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, Mandela's, all of those people have one thing in common. One, they do routines, and two, they are up before the majority of people are up. It makes sure that you are away from the distractions of the world, that you're away from the noise that the world has for you. And so I end up just doing three things that I think could end up helping anybody. The first thing is exercise, right? A healthy mind or a healthy body means a healthy mind. And
Mhm.
so as you start to exercise, like it reduces your anxiety, it reduces stress. Um, it's great for you because it lowers your level of cortisol. The second thing is that you learn something that excites you, maybe in the areas where you're trying to improve, something that you're looking at. And so for me, many times I'm actually just listening to podcasts, right? I'm listening to podcasts on subjects of things that I am trying to improve on, whether it's like emotional resilience, whether it's how to build a business plan, how to improve my relationship at home, anything. The important thing is that like it's a topic that you are interested in and something that you would be interested in getting better at. And then the
Yeah.
third and last thing is to journal. And you don't specifically have to call it journaling, but being able to just write down your thoughts, it gives you an opportunity to think about what you want to do or what you want to get out of the day before everybody gets up, right? So as you're waking up, you do these things, you start to journal. A lot of people these days are busy, right? But it's like you're
Mhm.
busy doing what, right? Like You're busy being busy. That's not going to get you anywhere. You need to learn how to gain clarity in the things that you are trying to go after, to get ideas out of your head and put them down onto paper so that you can start to actually read them. You can start to play out like different scenarios of different situations through the day. So like by the time that the day comes around, the day starts and people are just starting to get up, you are already ahead of the majority of the world, right? Like you're gonna have a great day if you plan these things. But now imagine like you've had this great day and you do this every day. You start to have great weeks. You start to have a great, you start to have a great year. And all of a sudden you look up and your competition can't even compete with you. They don't even have a chance because you've already started to do these small things. And it just takes you having to wake up way earlier than the majority of people are, or just earlier. It doesn't have to be way earlier. Get up earlier than the majority of people are getting up. I think that's one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that moment, when you have no other competition, your biggest competitor and your worthy enemy is you.
You.
So listen to those inside voices telling you, I can't, I'm too busy, I can't wake up in the morning, I can't join the 5 a.m. club. Waking up in the morning, actually, I actually wake up, even when I have nothing, I set my clock at 4:30.
Yeah.
It rings, sometimes I snooze, but the days that I have a commitment to make, like when I realized that I needed to keep working more on some of my own personal development.
Yeah.
I was waking up at 4:30 every morning.
Yeah. And it's great.
To study.
Well, like it really, yeah. Because like as you're starting to try to do something, the world's gonna fight back. Because it's not like you can just do what you want, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, like you brought up a really good point that your biggest enemy ends up becoming you, right? So it's like, what's really stopping people from being able to do stuff that feels like stuff that I've done, right? Like coming from similar backgrounds and being able to play in a field that is one of the biggest fields in the world. And in reality, it's I think the world, one of my biggest missions is always basically to do stuff like this, right? Like to inspire people through the journey or the story that I've gone through, just in general. But I believe that humans are built to want. Like we have this great intensity to want to learn things, to want to do certain things, to want to be somebody, not need, right? Because like those are two different things. Being able to need and being able to want are two different things. Needing is like it's like a scarcity mindset. Like being able to just get the basics out of the way. Like those are almost the needs. But when you want, like you want to be able to flourish, you want to be able to give. And like as we're alive, we have these big dreams as children. Like I wanted to build airplanes. Like that was the biggest thing. It never got them out of my head. But as you're growing up, the world starts to get at you. And there's this brainwashing that like just takes all over it's everywhere, right? As a child, you want to be an astronaut, you want to be a billionaire, like you want to be a doctor, whatever. But as you start to just climb, right? Like even before you have a single thought of like, oh, how do I go and do this? Like you're just happy because that's something you want to be. But all of a sudden, your family starts to say things like, oh, be reasonable. You know, no one from our family has ever done anything like that. You start to go out, society starts to come back at you. You can't do that. Only white people who come from a certain background or come from money are the only people that can do that. And all these things start to sink in your head, right? Like there's that great quote. How does it go? The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. And so therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. I think that's like by George Bernard Shaw. Right? Like your parents mean well. They want They want to
Yeah.
protect you. They love you. And at some
Yeah.
point, they might have had dreams, but they've also gotten brainwashed from their parents who have like passed on these limited beliefs to them. And they've passed those on to you. Like they
Yeah.
just want you to be well and they're well intentioned. But as you're
Mm-hmm.
growing up, like these limited beliefs start to creep in. Maybe your parents got hurt somewhere along the way. Like even if they know and they've tried, they've got limited beliefs from the world beating down on them. And
Yeah.
so even as you go to school, like the school system is made to accommodate the majority of people, to accommodate everyone. And so if you're somebody who's unique or don't really like, you know, you aren't really similar to the majority, right? Like as many immigrants that are coming to the US, like you're not gonna look like the majority. The way that
Mm-hmm.
things that you used to do things or your way of thinking might not be the way that everybody's thinking. And so as you start to do that, like you get to be put in these small boxes. Society starts to call you dumb because you're not doing things the way that like everybody's doing things. And as you
Mm-hmm.
start to have even these big dreams, right? Like you can't be too loud about it. You can't dream too big. You can't go too far outside of the box, right? Like your peers and everybody put these stamps. Like, oh, in order to do these big things, you have to be a genius. And there's people that are only born as geniuses, and that's how they're able to go from a place where you know they have nothing to a place
Mm-hmm.
where they're doing something amazing or great. But
Yeah.
it's like there's no such thing. Right? Like there's no such thing as, and I think there's
Yeah.
like studies on this. Like you need the minimum amount of IQ, and that's what the majority of the world has, right? Like just being able to talk, being able to reason. Like if you could do a small job, you can become a genius yourself by just putting in the hard work, making sure that like you're improving yourself, making sure you're curious enough to keep looking at things. Like what is it? There's a Steve Jobs quote that like I carry a lot. Anytime I have self doubts, right? Like, oh, I'm in a place where I don't think I can do the stuff that I want to do or that I don't belong. The Steve Jobs quotes is everything around you that you call life was made up by people who are no smarter than you,
Mm-hmm.
and you can change it, right? Just that
Yeah.
idea of like everything in the world, your whole life is made up by people who are no smarter than you. So you
That's
can do these things too. Like that's
yeah.
one thing that I will never forget. And I think that is
Mm-hmm.
something that everybody should take away. But just make sure you're able to just focus on improving yourself, looking at how you can change things uh, how you can change your circumstances
Mm-hmm.
and how you can improve your skills to make sure that that stuff happens. Be
Yeah.
curious, improve your skills. Waking up early starts all of it.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest messages that I want to pass on.
Yeah. I think you have highlighted a lot about uh, how people should be forward looking into the future and thinking about them, where they want to be. And one way to do that is to be curious. Build the curiosity. If you want to see what is inside that box, you have to open the box. Find a way to get inside the box. If you want to see what is outside the box, find a way to get outside the box, outside of your comfort zone. And with that, you are going to start improving. Like you
Yeah,
mentioned, self, self discovery, self development is one of the best contributions you can do to your family, to your friends, to the people around you, and those in your sphere of influence. And I
yeah,
know Isaac has told us a very powerful story. At one point in his life, after collaborating with friends and coming up with a business idea, a over $1 million business idea, which ended up collapsing. I know he was in the newspaper for this, but this interview is as seen on, is it NBC? As
yeah. We
as
were on
seen
we were
on
on
the
many channels.
as seen on the TV channel. So at one point in his life, he had all these opportunities, and then all of a sudden they disappeared. They became opportunity cost. And through that learning, even at one point, he wasn't able to provide for his own family. No milk for the baby. And I'm so happy to have played a big part in your life at that time. But when you reached out to me, I had no clue what was going on. And I just gave it out. So there is power. If you had shared your story even more with me, you could have gotten even more. But so there's power in sharing our stories and making people understand some of our struggles,
Yeah.
some of our overcomings. And so through that process, Isaac went through a self-discovery and self-development journey. And now he can provide for his family.
Yeah.
He's helped all his sisters, all his brothers. I know a lot of stories about what he's done. I think, Isaac, you have lived a curious life full of some of them pitfalls. You fall and then you get back up. So that's good. That's a good attitude to have.
No, man, I really appreciate it. And like you've always been a close friend. And I know that you've got that curiosity in you too, right? Like I know you define it differently, but I think at the end of the day, like it's all going down the same path.
Mhm.
And like it doesn't only help you kind of figure out who you are and the ability to kind of self-improve, work on your skills, but it helps you see the challenges that are out in the world
Yeah,
and the ability to overcome them, to be able to see a different perspective. Like one
yeah.
of the biggest things that I think I ended up learning is that um, not everyone has the same perspective that I do. Like there's always a different frame of reference. So it's learning to be able to see from different people's point of view has become a great skill.
Mm.
And I think that's one thing that I think you drill home, not only with like the Rubik's Cube and being able to be in different situations, learning different people's stories, but it's something you apply to your everyday life and you apply at work. And as I'm like starting to kind of go to my next phase, I think one of the biggest things that I'm starting to learn is that yes, hard work comes and is a big factor to being able to go further, but also hard work isn't everything, right? Like you need to be able to work smart. And I think that's one of the biggest chapters that I'm in right now, is learning to work smart so that I'm teaming up with people, being able to influence many other people. Like these are all things that I had done in my previous company, but being able to do it in a very efficient way that works almost every time and it's something that you can pass on to other
Mhm.
people, pass those learnings on, is a big factor. Um,
Mhm.
and so like as I go to want to learn to work smart, um, I think it's something that people should also take away, right? Be
Mhm.
curious, work hard and self-improve. Uh, definitely wake up really early. Like I feel like wakes up at 4. I wake up at 4, right? Like
Yeah.
it's become something it's become a part of who I am. Like when
Mhm.
I wake up, if I don't wake up early enough and I wake up and then just are able to just get my stuff and go to work, I notice it because I know that I'm not prepped for the day. Stuff are just
Yeah.
hitting me from left to right. I have no time to do anything.
Yeah.
Um, and then like the last thing is work with mentors, man. Like get a mentor, get somebody that you admire and try to learn from them because uh, you can work as hard as you want, but at some point, like you'll end up hitting a wall because there's
Mhm.
people out there who are not only working hard, who might be just as smart as you are, but
Yeah.
they are also working smart. And so if you're not doing both, they're gonna outpace you. They're gonna outpace you. One example is like, and I heard from somebody else is uh, like if you imagine I send my kid to a store. My 5-year-old son, I'm like, oh, there's a store down the block. Go down there and go grab milk or something like that. And they go. Now, as a kid, like they don't know where to go. Like they don't know what path they should be getting there. And that's kind of like how we are, right? Like as people that are trying to either accomplish something or trying to do something that they haven't done.
Mhm.
And so the kid might start at that one point, a block away from their destination, but they could walk all the way around the world come back and be able to find the store. Like
Yeah.
imagine all of the falls, the hurts, like the, you know, however old the kid is at that point. But
Mhm.
if you're with a mentor, you're somebody who has kind of done something like that, they'll be able
Mhm.
to point the direction to you. Like, hey, here, go this way, and you'll be able to hit the store. You'll get there so much more sooner. You
Mhm.
can always work hard and be able to go and get to your destination, but like imagine being able to go all the way around the world just to get back to a point that you can get to.
Mhm.
That's the one thing that mentoring and having a sense of direction does to you. Like it points you in the right, it points you in that right direction so that you're able to get there faster.
Yeah.
Those are the three things.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with you about the simple way and the complex way of getting to the desired destination. And both of them, none of them is wrong. There's the path to success will be long for some people, zigzag for most people,
Yeah,
and for some of them, it can be a straight line.
yeah.
So the ideal one is always zigzag, and people keep finding. That's
It
where the
is.
self. That's where the self discovery comes
It
in
is.
when
But
you. Yeah.
even with like a mentor, you're still gonna have the zigzag. It'll
Yeah.
just be sort of zigzag. Whereas like if you're doing it yourself and you're just banking on the fact that you're gonna work hard,
Yeah.
like, then it's gonna take way longer. You might not even make it because trying to travel around the world, you're gonna hit a lot of obstacles. You
Yeah.
ain't always gonna make it. Like,
You said one thing, and I want to say this. Maybe it's going to help you also, and it's going to maybe direct you. Remember you disappeared for some time, and if you're solving things on your own, it's gonna take you long actually to get to that shop. So there's three types of networks. I'm reading a book. I'm now listening to an audiobook called Act Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader. It's by I don't know how to say his name, Eminia Ibarra. And the book talks about three types of networks. The first one is personal network, which helps you with personal and professional development, like what you mentioned, the mentor, the coaching, that's where that falls in. And then the second one is operational network, which helps you with getting work done efficiently. So that's what you're working on now. You're saying that you want to get work done efficiently, use the resources that you have more well. So, and then the third one is strategic network. And that one is, it helps you with potential future priorities and challenges that you might face.
yeah,
So those three type of networks. In your network, people maybe focus on the first one, operational and personal, but the most ignored one, the most, according to the book, is the strategic one, where how do you prepare for a potential roadblock, failure, and all that. So that's a good book if you want to listen to it in Audible or borrow it, but it's a great book that talks about what you just explained there about the support system to help you get there.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, Isaac, I think we've had a very good discussion, and I'm hoping that those watching will be inspired by your story. It's a very powerful message for people to get on this self-development, strategic development, and also share their stories that the other type of media don't share. Like you gave an example about when you are at a refugee camp in Ethiopia, and then you referenced, yeah, like how they show those kids on TV, with like flies on their head and big stomach. And then you
Sorry,
said,
African.
and you admitted that, yes, I was one of those kids. So, but today you're sharing your story in a different light. You're sharing your success. And I wish that those media outlets will actually explore the journey of that person that they're showing and come up, tell the story that will inspire others to lead with their unique personal branding story also. So
Appreciate you, man.
we can end now, and Unless you have anything else to say, but this has been a very good session. Just imagine, just 2 questions. How do you define your personal brand? And what is your personal brand symbol? And how do you use it in your daily life? 2 questions I ask you. And all these stories, I think we've talked for more than 1 hour now.
Yeah.
And the stories are endless. So we are probably going to meet again, and we can focus on one story at a time and keep inspiring others. Thank you very much, Isaac, for spending time. Oh, one thing before I forget, you're wearing a blazer. You're wearing a blazer, and that was actually from my wedding rehearsal, right?
Yep, it was.
You're one of the groomsmen in my wedding. And thank you very much for standing beside me at that time. And I'm also wearing a tie. You know where that tie is from?
I don't.
This tie is for my wedding office.
Is that the same tie from there?
Same tie. I use it every day. And yeah, I'm going to be using it in all this. In every appearance, I'll wear it. It's part of family. So it reminds me of everything else. So it's symbolic. That blazer is symbolic too.
It is, man.
From Ruva, Africa. Ruva, Africa, where? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next time.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye. You, man.
What if the results don't come? They're not going to come if you quit. Keep showing up. I'm tired.